I've been filming underwater for about 4 years with a mirrorless, and I've had the opportunity to film in many different locations. When I first started, I directly fell in love with the whole process, from filming underwater to editing my content. I immediately got obsessed with getting better shots, and shortly after acquiring my first underwater housing, I took a freediving course to increase how much time I could stay underwater and to improve my overall experience. In this video, we'll be focusing on color grading underwater footage, and I'll take you through my process to get footage that looks like this to this. One thing that needs to be mentioned is that when it comes to underwater cinematography or photography, there is a lot to cover. From gear, camera settings, camera angle, filming techniques to skin tones correction and general color grading. For the sake of keeping this video nice and short, I'll have to skip a lot to go straight to the point. But in the meantime, I wanted to share with you that I'm currently working on a full comprehensive underwater filmmaking course that will be out in the next few months and might already be out when you watch this video. I'll put a link down in the description to either signing up with your email and be notified when the course goes live, or to access the course directly if you're watching this video in the future. Quick note, I'm going to use Final Cut Pro as my editing tool, but these techniques I'm going to show you also apply to DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro. Keep in mind that there is not only one way you can color grade underwater footage. The aim of this video is to give you tools that could help you achieve the look you're after. Here we've got 3 clips I'm going to color grade from scratch with you guys. The first clip we've got here is a shot of Emma freediving and going up. That was shot on the GoPro Hero 8, I believe, in 2.7K at 60 frames per second. I was using ProTune on low sharpness and the GoPro color profile. You can see it's quite faded, there is not much detail. The sand, the skin tones, everything is kind of blue, greenish, so it's not super appealing. And what I've done with my color grade, you can see the sand is a lot more white, the water here is in that deep dark blue, and the most important, the skin tones. This second clip here was shot on the Sony a7S III in S-Log3 in 4K 10-bit 422, so a pretty powerful codec, and you can see it's really flat. Obviously, like, there would be some work to do to bring that color space back to Rec 709 and achieve such a result much brighter and much more vibrant. Finally, another camera here filmed on the Sony a7R III in S-Log2. This is what we've achieved. First thing I like to do, you can see, is have an adjustment layer. So I'm just going to duplicate that one and clear it from all the adjustments I've done. If you don't have adjustment layers in your Final Cut, just Google it. You can find heaps of free resources online, and then you can download and apply that to your footage. This is the best way, I believe, to work with color grading in Final Cut Pro. Another thing I forgot to mention, so here I'm going to use those scopes. You can have them display by pressing Command 7, or if you click on View, Show in Viewer, and this is that one, video scopes. You want to click on view, have the split screen this way, click on the small icon, waveform, RGB parade. Same here, I'm going to use the waveform and the luma. So basically the luma is a blend of everything you see in the RGB parade, and it's just to give me an idea of the dynamic range. As you can see here, like, we are quite compressed. The highlights are not touching the 100 and the shadows are not touching the 0 point. Here, if we go on that clip, see we have extended the dynamic range quite a bit. I'm going to pull those curves now and add some kind of S-curve. We are not gonna go too crazy, it's just to give a bit of contrast to our image and work with this. Another thing I'm going to do right away is, you can see my red here are going below 0, and we don't want that, and you'll see that's going to be useful in the future. So I'm going to take this bottom part, and you can see I'm going to affect only that part of the red layers and kind of create a small curve here. As you can see, it's already affecting the skin tones quite a bit, so we're just going to push that slightly up to have some skin tones that seem not too bad, but we don't want to go too crazy, otherwise, see, everything is turning red, so we just want to push that up slightly. Something else we can do is remove a bit of the green that there is to give a nicer deep blue vibe to our image. Next part is going to be adding another correction on the color board, and I understand that you may not have exactly the same within DaVinci or Premiere, but I'm sure you'll find something with maybe the wheels, the color wheels. Basically what we are going to do here is try to extend a bit that dynamic range and increase the contrast and the separation between the highlights and the shadows. For this, I'm going to take this frame, which is going to be my hero frame, and I'm going to bring those highlights a bit higher, and see, we don't want to go too crazy. We absolutely don't want to go above 100. What we want is just the highlights to be closer to 100. Let's make sure our sand here is not clipping, so I'm just going to go on that previous frame. Here we see we are going slightly above, so we don't want that to happen. We're going to take this frame here. I'm going to bring my shadows down quite a bit. I'm looking at this LumaScope, don't worry about this for now. And I want to bring it down, and that's basically that drop you can see here at the bottom. And this, so I would assume those are the fins. These two spikes here are Emma's hair. So we want to find just the right amount. We've got already something that looks a bit better. Quick way to toggle on and off is to press the V shortcut on your keyboard, and you can see the before and after just by turning on and off the adjustment layer. So we're getting there, but I'm still not perfectly happy with that. One thing that happens is when we moved those exposure, we added like some kind of color. There is a bit of tinted color, and I know this is a GoPro footage, but you'll be surprised how much flexibility you have. Here, I'm not a huge fan of having colors in the shadows, and same with the highlights here. So we're going to play with the saturation tab on the color board, and I'm going to take down the saturation in the shadows and as well in the highlights. That's going to remove colors mostly from the sand here in the highlights and the bright part of the skin, but as well on the fins and that part that is quite dark in the image. Though I still want to maintain some color in the skin tones, for this I'm going to bring back this slider up, and usually the midtones are affecting pretty well the skin tones. Alright, we are getting there. This is something I would eventually share and I'm happy with. Now you can see there is still a bit of difference, like our skin tones look a bit more natural on this shot and there is a bit more to it. So we are going to do two things, and we are going to play with some minor adjustments. The first thing, we want to make sure the skin tones are really popping, and one way of doing so is to use the hue saturation curves. First thing we are going to do is increase a bit the saturation, but just this time on the skin tones. I'm going to drag over the skin tones here and bring up the saturation. Alright, we are nearly there, and now I want to make a few final adjustments. I do believe that the colors are maybe a bit too vibrant, so there are a few ways of changing this. Going back to your color board, I think would be one of the best ways, and you can adjust the master of all the colors here, like just to reduce a bit saturation. And if you go down the color curves here, you can see after all our adjustments, we actually moved down the red a bit more than what we would like. So I can adjust that in the original curve by just pushing this one up just a tiny bit. Another thing we could do is make sure our ocean flow here is white. There are multiple ways of doing it. You can use the hue saturation curve. I really like using the color board, so I'm going to add another color board. And I know my colors here are mostly in the highlights, and I maybe want to get rid of the blue haze that we have. So what I'm going to do is actually go into saturation, and I'm going to take down the saturation in the highlights even more, but I don't want to do it everywhere. So for this, I'm going to add a shape mask. We are going to click on shape here and make sure we are selecting only the ocean floor. I'm going to click on the plus here and make sure we are towards the end of the clip and bring that down. And now our shape mask follows the ocean floor. We could have tracked it as well, but this is a very easy tracking that we have right there, so I'm not going to bother with analyzing the clip, the footage. So now if we play it back, just as a comparison, this was our before. So before, after. Now we have this clip shot on a Sony a7S III S-Log3 4K 10-bit 422, and that one is actually much easier than it looks. Same here, we're going to bring an adjustment layer. So we're going to process that one a bit differently because we're operating in a log color space. There is a bit of a different workflow. The first thing we want to do is bring that footage to the color space we want, so the Rec 79 in our case. And I'm just going to load a custom LUT. I'm using the Phantom LUT. We are going to use the S-Log3 standard, and I'm going to use the neutral for the A7S III, and that brings us to the right color space. Now one thing that's quite important is that any adjustments you want to do, they have to be before this LUT. Otherwise you are actually affecting and changing the settings of an image that's already in another color space, and you're losing the advantage of actually shooting log, not using the full amplitude of the data of the footage, in our case the 10-bit. Basically what I'm going to do is make my adjustments directly on the clip, and usually what I would have is multiple clips of the Sony Sony a7S III, for example, back to back, and I would drag my adjustment layer over multiple clips so that I have only one color grade above all my clips, but I'm color correcting each clip individually. So now we are on the clip. We're going to use a very simple tool, which is just this color board. You may not have this one by default. If you don't, you'll find it by clicking on this small arrow. Very similarly to the footage of the GoPro, we're going to load the color curves, just adjust a bit the overall S-curve of the image. Not too much, just a little bit to give a bit of contrast and have something to work with. Another reason why I like using the curves is because I can change the tint directly here at the beginning. One thing you can notice here on my Luma scopes is those, I would say, layers. This is because I'm working currently on the proxy file. I'm not working on the 4K 10-bit, and we are actually losing data. There is a bit of loss. I would always suggest to do your color grading with the optimized or the original media, not the proxy, because you actually color grading a file that is not very friendly for color grading and that doesn't have much data. So I'm just going to switch back to optimized, and you can see those very straight lines now are looking much more like nice curves, and there is a lot more data. Let's go back on the clip, and here the tint, the overall tint is very green. So I'm just going to pull my curves in the greens, not too much, just to remove that green from the overall image. Very similarly here, we make sure that our reds are not clipping, and they are not. So we are all good. Next step is color board. And we are going to play with that first tab that we haven't used in the first example. And the first thing we are going to do is adjust our dynamic range via the exposure tab in the color board. And I'm just going to bring down those highlights. I don't think those should be pure white. And we are going to bring down our shadows as well by dragging this slider and maybe bring up our midtones a little bit. I'm going to crank up as well a bit the saturation for now, just so that we can have a bit more details, and especially in the midtones, which I think is where the turtle is, so more in the midtones and the highlights. You can see there is a lot of blue and green still on the turtle, and we want to, I think, bring back a bit of the orange-ish colors that we can see on our skin. For this, usually I use the midtones and drag it down and try to find something that I like. Till my highlights are a bit too bright, so I'm just going to play with those. And we are going to as well play with the highlights, which is going to represent the turtle. Everything pretty much except the water. And I'm just going to drag it down and try to find a nice spot. And you can use obviously the arrows on your keyboard to adjust your colors. I think that's pretty much it. So that's what I would do in this one. And just to see the before and after, I'm just going to have to turn off that adjustment layer, which is the LUT. This is the clip we would call color corrected, and that was the original one. So what we did is first add the conversion LUT, so that we bring back the footage in the right color space, and that's the color we came up with. This one was shot on the Sony a7S III in S-Log2, and what's very interesting is I'm actually not sure what I did on this one, and my process is a bit different, but this is all to show you that there are many ways to achieve a result that you like. I did use like a color board and color curves here. I did use a LUT on this one, as well as color curves as well. Here I use a film convert just to add a bit of contrast. See, like I'm using only 25% of this one, so it's just to add a bit of color. I'm just going to show you that we can achieve a very similar result without any LUT or anything, and by doing everything manually. We are going to start the same way. This is S-Log2, so I kind of want to add a LUT. Technically you would use an S-Log2 LUT. I'm using the Phantom one, and we're going to use the neutral one. Similarly, we're going to go on our clip and go directly on the curves and do exactly the same thing that I just showed you. I'm going to add a bit of contrast, and obviously this image is quite faded, so if I come back to the original one, see, the clarity is not that great. Our whale shark here in the background is actually 10 meters away from me. I was using the 24-70, probably zoomed in at 30 mil from what I can tell in this image. Our clarity, despite the sun hitting Emma very nicely, was not the best, and you can see our whale shark quite faded, and so we want to bring back the contrast, especially in the back, so that we can reveal that whale shark and make this image a lot more interesting. We are going to add this LUT and then go under on the clip, add a bit of contrast, and I might have to bring down that S-curve quite a bit on this side here as well. We're going to do the same, make sure we're not clipping our reds, so I'm just going to bring that up. As you can see, because we've got a LUT that's acting differently on top, it doesn't work as well, so I might play a bit with the curve but it doesn't look like it's working that well. Apparently I was quite close to 0 as well. So I'm just going to reset that one for now, and we'll come back on this one later. I'm going to remove some of the green in the overall image right away, and same with the blues, but not too much, just to give that nice cyan look. Now next step we are going to do is use the color board. I'm not super happy with the highlights here, so we're going to go into our exposure tab directly, take that down quite a bit so that we make sure we're not clipping the skin tones at least of Emma, and we want our shadows to be much lower, so we're going to take them down. I'm not happy at all with what we've got, so we are going to have to play a bit with the different tools. One thing I like to go directly and change is my saturation here, and I'm going to take down the saturation in my shadows and as well in my highlights and see what it does. The next thing we're going to do is our midtones are way too green, so we're going to remove some of the green in this part of the image. I'm going to keep playing with that board until I've got a look that I like. So my shadows here are way too blue as well, so we are going to play with the sliders. And one good way to see what's happening is actually to really push the colors way further than what you would usually do. And see, like here, just by going a bit crazy on this, I can tell if I pull my shadows here quite a lot, my skin tones actually start looking not too bad. So maybe we're on the right track. I just play around and see if there is any other spot that looks good. But hey, here I'm actually pretty happy. We've got some kind of skin tones that are where we want. Obviously the pink here is way too saturated. I've got a starting base at least. I'm not happy at all with the saturation and the blue, and obviously we are way too contrasty around the body here on this part, so we're going to play and have to correct all of this. So let's go back to the exposure. We're going to just cycle through those three until we have a look that's a bit closer to what we are after. So now, just by rotating around those three tabs, actually I've managed to reach a look that I'm fairly happy with. It's still not perfectly there, but we've got much better skin tones and much better colors overall in the image. So it's just by using the color board. And if I go back to the main menu and remove the effects, that's what we are just with the corrective LUT, remember? And that's what we've got now. So we are in a much better position. I still think that the fin here, the purple, is a bit too saturated, and I think it's missing a bit of color on Emma here, so we are going to have to correct that and maybe to do some local adjustments. I'm going to try to use the hue saturation correction, and we are going to select saturation 1 and select our fin and maybe drag it down a notch. I still think we are selecting way too much of the rest of the image, so I'm going to narrow down my selection, and that's before and after, so very subtle, but you can see I'm taking down quite a bit. And now I'm missing a bit too much of the colors in the skin tone, so I just want to make sure I'm going back to my original color board. We're going to bring back a bit of saturation here in the midtones, so we're going to take this one back up and see that's bringing back a bit of the blue as well. And now just let's create another adjustment layer, and we're going to use another color board, and I just want to affect only the skin tones in this one, so I know they are in the midtones, and usually what affects the most the skin tones is to remove the blues from them. So if you pull that one down, obviously now I'm adjusting the whole image, but I just want to find something that I like on the skin tone. So if I zoom in, we can see we brought a bit of orange and yellow in the skin, which is a bit closer of what we want. Obviously we're affecting a lot of the blue of the layer, so we are going to change that. So let's go back and fit and make sure we are only affecting the skin tone. So for this you can use the color mask and select the skin here. The good thing is that it's giving you a preview of what you are actually selecting. So here we've got the legs and as well the reflection at the top, which is exactly what we want. So that's before applying the mask and now with applying the mask. See, I'm not affecting at all the blue of the water, and I start actually really liking this look. I can as well go into saturation or exposure to adjust directly within that color mask around here. A good thing to do is always increase a bit the softness in case you've got some leaks of the colors. Here, let's make sure we are not clipping too much those highlights. And as you can see on the scopes on the left side, I'm affecting only the skin tones right now. So let's take that down a notch. I think we are not too bad right there. Another thing I want to do is our whale shark here is a bit hidden in the shadows. So we're going to bring back some contrast, but just in that portion of the image. I'm going to use either a color board or let's use a color curve to increase contrast just the way I want. Obviously I'm affecting the whole image. A good way of selecting our whale shark is to use a radial shape. It's very easy. We are going to just go at the beginning of the clip, have it roughly. We don't want to affect the skin tones and anything else. We are going to add a keyframe by just clicking on that plus button here. We are going to go at the end of the clip, make sure we are still in the same location. Let's go in the middle. It looks like we are not moving too much in this case, and click on done. Now let's have a look. So that's how we created the look, and again, like if you remove the LUT, that's our adjustments without the LUT. Let's have a look at the clip I originally had. So yeah, it's a bit brighter around the skin tones, there is a bit more saturation in the water, a bit more blue, so it's fairly easy to actually recover that, and we are going to just affect the water. And for this, I'm just going to use another color board. I like to use different layers for different items I'm changing. So here we want to increase our saturation mostly in the highlights and maybe in the mid-tones. And we want to bring the exposure even more of the bright parts here, but as you can see, I'm nearly clipping my skin tone, so we want to make sure we're only affecting the water. For this, we are going to use a color mask. I'm going to select that part of the water and make sure we are softening this quite a bit. So that's before and after. Here we go. One thing I like to do is add a bit of sharpness, especially on 1080p footage. So for this, you go into your effects, you add some sharpness. Make sure you're on your adjustment layer here and make sure this is the last layer. And usually around 2 is a good amount. And this is our final results before. And this is our after. And that's it for today, guys. I hope this video at least gave you some tools or ideas to color correct your underwater footage. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. In the meantime, please consider leaving a thumb up, subscribing, bell notification on to help the algorithm. And I thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Cheers.